I'm Nate Tabak, the Border and North America correspondent for FreightWaves. I'm here with Gary Newbury to talk about e-commerce disruption and the last mile in Canada. Gary is a retail supply chain and digital fulfillment strategist. He spent the last 30 years transforming supply chains and distribution networks in the UK and most recently here in Canada as an executive for Gordon Food Service. Gary, good to be with you.
Good to be here, Nate.
So Gary, back in March when Canada locked down for COVID-19, I remember one of the first things I tried to do was order groceries online. And I think I did this with Loblaws, which is one of the largest sort of grocery, food service company in Canada. And I couldn't get a delivery window that would, it's like 2 or 3 weeks out. And so I went in and lined up with everyone else and, at the beginning of the pandemic. So what was going on here that I wasn't able to get groceries delivered at a time that I think everyone really needed that?
There was a blanket, I wouldn't say, reluctance to invest in formal online services across the retailing industry. There were a few, obviously, exceptions, but generally speaking, the grocers were quite backwards in terms of advancing their online strategies and their fulfillment strategies alongside that. So I'd spent quite a lot of time in things like data science and thinking about how they're going to acquire their customers, but they failed to spot that actually until you deliver the stuff to customers, you haven't got actually a proposition that consumers want to receive. There's a big appetite in Canada across, we've got 38 million people here. And they want online services and are desperate for it. And the lockdown itself showed how desperate they were, with many people who never used online before actually going on and taking that chance, making it happen. And many of them were quite disappointed. You were not an exception. You were not an isolated case. Many people, especially the elderly people who couldn't get to the stores because of the risk to their health, etc., or their perceived risk to their health, were getting 2 or 3 weeks delivery windows, and then they were getting cancelled on the day, and then being told to rebook. What was happening on the ground was the retailers in general were underprepared. They didn't understand, one, what they needed to do and how to scale their proposition when this sheer volume of demand hit them. And so it was really, the only way I can describe it was a mad scramble.
And I think that it sounds like what you're saying is that this was not just a simple case of a simple inability to maybe meet an unprecedented demand, is that there were, it seems, some long-standing deficiencies in retail in terms of just the kind of this basic, sort of e-commerce and, fulfilling, orders and that sort of thing. What was going on, on here in sort of the years leading up to this that really this wasn't in place to really kind of properly address the needs of Canadian consumers?
Yeah, very much so. I remember a comment made by the leader of Loblaws, 2017? He was launching at this scale in Western, was thinking about launching 100 click and collect services across his fleet of, I think it's 1,700 grocery stores, a combination of corporate and franchise stores. And he was puzzling the question, I don't think our consumers actually want this, but we'll give it a try. And my comment to that was, they don't know what they're missing. As soon as they get online service and avoid typically your store, as well as many other stores, they will really buy into it. And the pandemic or the lockdown actually forced many people who, as I said earlier, had no real sort of appetite for going online. They went online. They wanted stuff, and we found that stock was a problem. And then the ability for the retailers to scale their proposition quickly, efficiently, and to actually meet the expectation. Because if we think about, for those people like me who buy frequently on Amazon, our education through Amazon has been, I order something on Prime, I get it on my doorstep 3 o'clock the next day. Excuse me. And that is the expectation for something coming across from America, from across Canada, wherever they stock that inventory. I should be able to place an online order for click and collect and drive to my store and pick it up. That was completely not the case.
What needs to be in place for, say, a big retailer, big grocer, to be able to implement it? Like, what are kind of the nuts and bolts of this?
Yeah, I often struggle with people who have a strong propensity to kind of heavily invested in technology to think it's all about technology. Actually, it's pretty much all about process, of which the technology is an element of that. So they need to really work out, how does e-commerce work into that overall proposition? They also need to think about, what of our consumers and their preferences, what kind of percentage do we think they're going to, how many consumers are going to buy from us online versus going to our shops, as a measure of what our capacity needs to be in the future, and start working on how are we going to do that? How are we going to do that at scale? How are we going to make it profitable? Is this something we actually want to do? Because the retail's dirty little secret is that if you get e-commerce wrong, you can actually lose a lot of money very fast. So they need to embrace the digital age, embrace the online services that their customers are actually, or consumers are actually screaming for. Once they get an appetite for it, they don't want to turn back, and start looking at how to integrate stores and e-commerce into a blended whole. And this is sometimes where retailers, because they tend to be heavily siloed, have tended to set up, the merchandising stores kind of route to market. Then they've got digital over here, and it's normally staffed by lots of bright young things who are doing social media and all that kind of stuff, and digital advertising and whatever. And the missing piece is the actual fulfillment. Who with a technical background in social media, who on the store side, who's been used to moving great big, truckloads of pallets going into DCs, into stores, being poured out onto shelves, who actually understands how to pick singles at scale and get those distributed to residential addresses. That's a completely and fundamental different skill set.
And so then we have there's the transportation side of this equation, is that you need a vehicle to actually deliver these goods to people. And I think one of the challenges, with last mile, is that it is kind of a notoriously sort of unprofitable or not very profitable business. And so once you have a sort of your infrastructure in place to do this, to do online based grocery delivery, things like that, you then have to think about, okay, how are we actually going to physically do that? And I think you have a dilemma. Do you want your own vehicles? Do you use a third party? And then what is the technology in place to actually do that logistics? And so where are we in Canada with that right now?
Well, there's quite a mixed picture here, and an increasing preponderance to move towards Instacart, because Instacart provides a variable cost base. You only pay for what you use. They can deliver an on-demand service, which is very attractive to consumers. Rather, if we look at, say, Sobeys, which is number 2 grocer compared to Loblaws, they've decided to go down a strategy of having a centralized warehouse for singles picking, and to have their own fleet delivering next day across the GTA, and they're going to expand into parts of Quebec next year. Well, next day may fit the profile of certain customers, but typically, if we're going to, I wouldn't say, compete with people going to the stores, a 2-hour delivery of your goods to your doorstep actually almost replaces a visit to the stores, because in fact, one might argue it saves time. So some retailers are thinking that Instacart or Instacart's DoorDash, those kind of I'd call them kind of crowdsourced solutions, are an attractive proposition. So if we look at Costco, Walmart, Sephora, M&M, Staples, and there's probably a few others, Indigo, they're all sort of progressed down this path because it's relatively cheap to implement. It doesn't require any massive capital spending and commitment over years. It's probably just sign up a contract and you're Instacarted. There's some interface on their website, but in fact, retailers have to hand over their customers' data. So the customer has to set up an account and order their stuff. And so Instacart are producing or collecting a huge amount of very interesting information for communities, for individual households, about what do they consume in their household across multiple banners. And that information is going to be very valuable to somebody at some stage. So that's one end of us, which is the on-demand. For the more scheduled thing, Sobeys is a great example of that. Once they get their operation fully scaled across the GTA, and as I say, into some parts of QC, using their own vehicle, their own facilities. So they're taking it out of the store. Whereas the Instacart solution or the crowdsourced solution requires the stock that's in your store to be visible to the customer when they're ordering, and for the personal shopper effectively to go in and collect that and bring it to your door. As a consumer, I think Instacart are brilliant. As a retailer, I'd be very cautious about looking at it as some kind of permanent solution, because you are handing over a hell of a lot of data that is very important to your business. And when you've got Costco, Walmart, Staples, whatever on there, your profile, your business compared to your competitors is very visible to those people in Instacart.
And I think there's also an issue of the long-term viability of an Instacart solution, because you have a population of 38 million people in Canada who are mostly concentrated in big metropolitan areas, but at the same time you have a lot of people who are sort of in the Canada is among the wealthier countries in the world, but a lot of people, you have a lot of immigrants, recent immigrants, where the ability to have to spend more for your groceries, to have them delivered in in Instacart, just there isn't it isn't viable, because if Canada already has relative to the United States higher food prices in general, and you add on this extra cost to this, just the economics of it don't seem to support actually, scaling that business. And I wonder in the long term if a Sobeys model is more of the wave of the future.
If I was to go into Instacart, I have to pay a fee to get a delivery, and I also probably have to hit a certain minimum before I get access to the 2-hour service, and then I have to see it in my busy schedule is paying $9, whatever it might be, or $4, or even if it's $3, if it's through Costco. I had a 2-hour delivery, picked up a few items, and it was for free, and it was in 2 hours, and it was on a Sunday. I mean, that was outstanding. And guess what? They turned up in 40 minutes. I was delighted. When you're running Sobeys, I think their pricing structure is $7.99. But it is next day, so you have to plan it. You have to say order on Monday for Tuesday delivery. Very generous number of slots at the moment, but as they scale their proposition, I think that the delivery slots will become much more difficult to meet your requirements and their capabilities to be in the area to deliver your shopping. The other side of this, when we talk about grocery, is we're talking about a temperature-controlled set of products. Some of it's freezer, some of it's on the cooler, and some of it's dry product. For a very short drive from the store to your residential address, such as Costco using the store fulfillment model, is probably okay. But as soon as Instacart said, well, do you know what, we're going to do 2 or 3 people shopping because they're all in broadly the same area, I'll actually send my shopper in and do 3 lots of shopping, which would be a natural progression of scaling their own model. What happens if after the first delivery you make, there's some kind of hold up, maybe the car breaks down or whatever. So suddenly those products, which in a normal pattern of people going out and doing their own shopping, they would just bring it home, it might be 10, 20 minutes and no problem. Suddenly that delay is now altering the temperature conditions of those products. So there are some risks around using Instacart, and especially if they scale on the basis of, rather than going in to do individual shopping and going backwards and forwards, even if it is to the same neighborhood, they may choose to accumulate orders to make sure that they get some kind of densities going and make more money.
So, Gary, one of the other, I think that's disruptive things that has happened because of COVID is that you've had the land border of U.S. and Canada closed for non-essential travel, and one of the things that has basically virtually halted is this time-honored tradition of Canadians going just south of the border and shopping, and they're looking for lower prices and access to things that they have a harder time in Canada. And that's not happening anymore. And so one of the interesting things that is happening is that you're seeing a bit of a shift where cross-border U.S. to Canada e-commerce, you're seeing some growth there as these people realize, oh, we can actually get these goods, for maybe not much more money than had we driven down there. And so people are starting to do this. What do you think are going to be the impacts of this kind of shift here in Canada?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things going on that we don't know how much volume was already happening that way. We don't track that on the inbound side to Canada. So I suspect that it will be growing. We don't know how big it will be growing. And say where I live in Toronto, and going across the border is quite a long journey down to either around the corner to Niagara or right down to Windsor and crossing over a bridge. That's a 5-6 hour journey each way. So there's a time investment that's required to do that. There may be other social elements that are involved, but the thought of being able to buy cheaper stuff, albeit it's in US dollars, I suspect, the only problem would be actually getting it across the border with a normal way, and with the impact of COVID on border staff and the backlog of stuff, it could, although the American to American platform might be next day or 2 day, I suspect that as we get out of the major conurbation parts of Canada, like Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, whatever, and we get into sort of the sticks, it could still be maybe a week or even longer to expect to receive that delivery, and that may actually pose a difficulty of understanding that, I've just placed my order, Amazon could get it to me tomorrow, why can't you guys? So it's if you're going to come into Canada, I would be suggesting that you just check what the arrangements are. You can use normal small package carriers like FedEx, UPS, whatever, already all over here. So that I may be imagining a problem that doesn't exist, but it is worth checking the service times that are involved. But it's a good market, and there's a big appetite for e-commerce here. The convenience of e-commerce in Canada is high.
And I think also a potential opportunity, I think, for Canadian-based fulfillment of goods coming from the U.S. Gary, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Looking forward to meeting you one day, when the pandemic is not going on. Thank you so much for joining us here at FreightWaves.
Okay, thank you. Very welcome.